world, they're not backing the international justice with regard to Israel.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't say that it's all countries, because there are countries like South Africa, Colombia, Malaysia, and the other countries who have joined the ICC, countries who have joined the ICJ proceedings for genocide. There are countries who would like to advance justice. Unfortunately, a stronghold guaranteeing Israel's impunity, headed by the United States and followed by many European states, who are validifying the efforts of decades in order to build
Can
an
you
international criminal law system that we have, to turn it into what we have. And they are dismantling it day after day.
What do you make of the timing of all of this? Because the context is, of course, you still have the situation in Gaza where more than 70,000 people have been killed, the majority of them civilians. You already have an appalling situation in the West Bank, involved in the bombardment of Iran and bombarding Lebanon. Do you think Israel feels the world can't keep up? And that's why it's continuing to do more things.
Absolutely. Israel has been emboldened by the impunity that has historically been granted to it, but particularly in the last 2 years, despite the fact that Israel has been ordered to dismantle the occupation, and it has been given by the International Court of Justice 1 year to do so, and there is an obligation on the other member states not to aid, not to assist, not to recognize as legal the consequences of an unlawful act. So they remain engaged with Israel. They remain engaged with Israeli leaders, despite the fact that even the prime minister is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity, despite the genocide proceedings. So this is why I said it's these member states who continue to treat Israel business as usual are to an extent complicit. This will have to be determined by a court of law. But of course, from my perspective, from my observation point, Israel is accelerating the genocide against the Palestinian people through a variety of acts that are destructive for the body, for the soul, and the end game is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
Thank you, Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur. Well, now let's meet our panel of guests on today's Inside Story. And in Ramallah, we have Mustafa Barghouti, General Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative political party. And Rehovot in Israel, Ofer Kasif, a member of the Israeli Parliament, the Knesset. And in London, William Sharbas, Professor of International Law at Middlesex University and author of the book, The Abolition of the Death Penalty in International Law. Thank you all for joining us. Let me start with you, William. We have important developments, but I think it's important probably to tell our viewers first what the situation was before this law, because Israel did have the death penalty, but there hadn't been an execution for more than 60 years.
Israel is what we call in the United Nations and international law a de facto abolitionist state. It has not used the death penalty for 60 years. I don't think people have even been sentenced to death, but certainly it hasn't been carried out for 60 years. There were only 2 executions in the history of Israel. So this is a very dramatic development not only if the legislation survives the Supreme Court, but also if it's implemented. It's an extremely rare occurrence for a state that has stopped using the death penalty to revert to the practice of the death penalty. There are only a handful of countries where this has happened, and now Israel joins that rather unhappy and miserable club.
Ofer, you are a member of the body that voted for this, the Knesset, 62 law members to 48, and champagne corks being popped while it happened. Are you ashamed of this vote?
Ashamed is an understatement. It's much more than being ashamed. But that's not the first time that I've been ashamed of this specific parliament, the 25th Knesset. But no doubt that this is the peak of the malicious behavior of this specific Knesset and coalition. That's disgusting, to say the least. And I actually entitled this law not as a death penalty law, but as a genocide law. And if you allow me, I can explain logically why it should be regarded as a law that actually enables, not to say requires, genocide.
Why should it be called the genocide law?
Well, apart from the law as such itself, that we should analyze and refer to, and I believe we will do that, we have to see the specific context, the context of the political discourse, mainly within the coalition, but also in the public, in the society at large. Two things should be observed. First, that there is a common parlance within the public and especially within the coalition discourse that there's nothing as such as Jewish terrorism. If there is nothing like Jewish terrorism, that also means or entails logically that there aren't Jewish terrorists. And if there aren't Jewish terrorists, that means that this law doesn't appeal and apply. This law doesn't apply to Jews by definition. On the other hand, the very same who argue that there's nothing such as Jewish terrorism argue that all Palestinians are terrorists. Just 3 days ago, literally, the chair of the Interior Committee of the Knesset, who is a member of the gang of Ben Gvirs, said, and I quote, that there aren't innocent people in Jenin and that there aren't innocent children in Jenin. That's common parlance. Now, if there aren't innocent Palestinians, neither children, that means that all Palestinians, according to those bigots, are terrorists.
Okay.
And if all terrorists should be hanged,
let me bring in Mustafa as our representative of the Palestinians, if I can now. Mustafa, I mean, we have discussed issues on this program so many times together. I assume now it takes a lot to shock you, but the fact this passed and you saw this go into law, and you just heard Ofer talk about Ben Gvir, the architect of this, he was wearing a golden noose-shaped lapel pin. What do you think of the people who pushed this into law?
It's very simple. The passing of this criminal law, which is another war crime by Israel, and the way they celebrated the passing of this law, and the pens you have just described, which shows ropes that will be used to hang us, the Palestinians. All of that shows you one thing. Israel has moved so far in the direction of fascism. This is a fascist government, and these are fascist ministers, and this is a fascist establishment. Nothing else can be said about this behavior. They are not only fascist, they are also consolidating the deepest and most clear system, worst system of apartheid. At the time of South African apartheid system, nobody dared to say that if a black man kills a white man, he will be executed, but if a white man kills the black man, he will not be executed. That's exactly what Israel is saying. Palestinians only can be executed. Palestinians only will be subjected to death penalty. And that is the worst form of a system of apartheid. But more than that, what you see here is an act to legalize the crimes that are happening against Palestinians. The fact that Israel is executing Palestinians through field execution, I think there are between 1,000 and 2,000 cases of field execution practiced by Israel, especially in Gaza. It is a way of legalizing the fact that Israeli troops go around and assassinate people. And it is a way of legalizing the fact that Israel killed so far 90 Palestinian prisoners since the 7th of October in Israeli jails. They're killing people by torture. They're killing people by depriving them of food, by starvation. And they're killing people by deprivation of medical treatment. And more than that, those who even rape Palestinians, as in the case of the 5 Israeli soldiers, they are relieved from any responsibility. And the cases were dropped against them. So that shows you what we face here is not only a war crime, is not only a system of apartheid. What we face here is a system of fascists who want to impose their fascist laws on the Palestinian people.
William, the global trend for some considerable time has been towards abolition of the death penalty. There's been condemnation of this move from the European Union, from the United Kingdom, from the United Nations. The US, though, the State Department, says it respects Israel's sovereign right to determine its own laws and penalties for individuals convicted of terrorism. The US itself gets a lot of criticism for its death penalty and the amount of executions, more than 1,000 people put to death since the 1970s. But what Israel's done here doesn't even have the guardrails that the US system does it? And I'm not just talking about the discrimination, the fact this only faces Palestinians.
You know, the U.S. death penalty is also characterized by discrimination, and it's been demonstrated. Criminologists have shown how it's not the people themselves, it's not by the race of the offender, but by the victim. So that if the victim of a murder is white, a black man is much more likely to get the death penalty than if the victim of the murder is a person of color. So there's a lot of racism that it infects the US justice system generally, but it also affects the application of the death penalty. That being said, for many years, the death penalty has been declining in the US, but there has been an uptick since the beginning of last year, since Trump became the president, mainly in the state of Florida. And, you know, it's kind of an irony. The 3 states in the world now that are moving backwards, that are moving towards more executions, besides Israel, are the United States and Iran. They're the 3 worst as we speak right now. There are only about 30 countries in the world that now use the death penalty out of nearly 200. And of those 30, the majority only use it very occasionally. So it's becoming increasingly isolated. And all that does really is underscore how special this is, what's happening in Israel. It's as if they don't care about what the rest of the world thinks of them.
Ofer, I mean, in terms of public opinion, I think that's pretty shocking. Israelis, as far as I can see, seem to support what the Knesset has done. But I did think it was interesting and rather grim, the fact that this legislation specifies the way to kill people, and the people in this case are Palestinians, as hanging. And that, as I understand it, is because Israel's doctors' union won't carry out lethal injections.
Yeah, that's true, but I think that that's relatively marginal. Obviously, I oppose to any kind of death penalty. Whoever was
ሀገራችን ካላት የማዕድን ሀብት 40% ብቻ የተገኘ መሆኑ
ግና ነው። ብልጽግና
እኒሳ ሜትር
ያ ኤጀቱር አከባር እንካር
ጠብቃቸው እስከዘላለሙ ከፍ ከፍ አድርጋቸው በአንድ ልጅ በጌታችን በአምላካችን በመድኃኒታችን በኢየሱስ ክርስቶስ በክቡር ደሙ ዋጃት። ቤዛም የሆናት ቅድስት ቤተክርስቲያንን ጠብቃት። ለንጹሕ ወገንና ቅዱስ ለሆነ ሕዝብ ማደሪያ ትሆን ዘንድ በዚህች ቅዱስ ቤተክርስቲያን ተሰብስባቸው የጸለያቸው ጌታችን ኢየሱስ ክርስቶስን ቅዱስ ሥጋውና ክቡር ደሙን የተቀበላችሁ በማወቅ ወይም ባለማወቅ የሰራችሁትን ኃጢአታችሁን ሁሉ ይቅር ይበላችሁ። ሥጋው የሕግና የሥርዓት ደም ስለሚሆን ደግሞ አሸናፊ የማርያም ልጅ ኢየሱስ ክርስቶስ ባለፈው ይቅር ይበላችሁ፣ ከሚመጣውም ይጠብቃችሁ። ከዚህ የተሰበሰባችሁ ወንዶችም ሴቶችም ከኃጢአት ማሰሪያ የተፈታችሁ ንጹሐን ሁኑ። እኔንም እናንተንም ለመንግሥተ ሰማያት የበቃን የተዘጋጀን ያደርገን ዘንድ እግዚኦ መሐረነ ክርስቶስ። በእንተ እግዝእትነ ማርያም መሐረነ ክርስቶስ። የእግዚአብሔር አብ ጸጋ፣ የእግዚአብሔር ወልድ ቸርነት፣ እግዚአብሔር መንፈስ ቅዱስ አንድነት፣ የእመቤታችን የቅድስት ድንግል ማርያም አማላጅነት፣ የጻድቃን የሰማዕታት የቅዱሳን መላእክት ተራዳኢነት ከሁላችን ጋር ይሁን። በሐሌው በገቢር በነቢብ የተሰራውን ኃጢአት የማይሰራ ኃጢአት እግዚአብሔር ይፍታ። እግዚአብሔር ከሁላችሁ ጋር ይሁን።
ይደረግልን። በእውነት እግዚአብሔር እኛን አገልጋዮቹን በፍቅር ይባርከን። የተቀበልነውን ሥጋና ደም ለኃጢአት ማስተስሪያ ይሁነን። ዲያብሎስ የሚያሰራቸውን ኃጣውእ በመንፈስ ቅዱስ ነሳዘን አሰናምተን ቸርነትን የተመላሽ ክብርት የምትሆን ስልጣንን በረከት እሷን ሁላችን ተስፋ እናደርጋለን። ከክፉ ስራ ሁሉ አርቀን በበጎ ስራ ሁሉ አንድ አድርገን ክቡር የሚሆን ሥጋውን ደሙን የሰጠን ክቡር ምስጉን ነው። ክብርህን ተቀበል ድነትንም አገኘን በጌታችን በኢየሱስ ክርስቶስ በመስቀሉ አጋዥነት። አቤቱ ከመንፈስ ቅዱስ ጸጋን ተቀብለን አንተ እናመሰግናለን።
እግዚአብሔር አምላክ ሁላችሁንም ይባርካችሁ ይቀድሳችሁ። ባርኮ ቀድሶ በሰላም በስምምነት በፍቅር በአንድነት ያኑራችሁ። በሰላም አቅፎ ደግፎ ወደ ቤታችሁ ያግባችሁ።
ኒቆዲሞስ ነው ንሕተት አቦታትና ሰይጣን በትዕቢቱ ከድንቁርና ሃይማኖት ናንፍለወ ክናምን በሊትና ወለዶ ቅድመ